Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with some Thanksgiving Total War Warhammer 2 goodness. Um, Recently there was a video that Dav did on the red, or the, not the red Duke, the Blood Dragon, the new Vampire Lord that was implemented for the Vampire counts, and kind of testing him out in duel situations, and it was actually really interesting. I saw that Karl Franz actually barely scraped out a win against him. I thought it was kind of interesting scenario to watch. But at the end of the video, Dad was discussing how he thinks it's a pretty bad matchup for Empire that's really difficult, and Franz is basically guaranteed to lose in the air. Well, generally can, I think, agree with that, but I think this matchup isn't actually that bad for Empire, and I've said this before, similar things before, especially with Greatswords. Empire, I think, has some very potent options that they can put on the field, and so in this matchup here against the Vampire counts, I decided to run with Karl, and very cav-centric build, because I think mobility is kind of key, because your front line is generally going to collapse. You can go tankier. I've done infantry builds in the past, but generally I definitely think tanky and flexible is the way to go. So for my Lord, Karl Franz on a horse, I didn't want him up in the air, partially because he's just expensive. You're paying a whole bunch for what's not all that beneficial. You get Blood Roar, which isn't that good against, and you get Flight, but the AP is already there, so that's kind of why I like to just keep Karl on a horse. Keeps him safer, and at the same time, you still have your AP. He does have the Reichland Runefang, and of course Golem Raz for those crazy buffs. Stand your ground, Foe Seeker, as well as Hold the Line, which is a really solid AoE buff. You get a lot of extra leadership, a lot of extra melee defense this way, especially stacked on Stand Your Ground and his innate aura. Alongside him, Jade Wizard with the new Regrowth, Earth Blood, Life Bloom, and Power Stone. The front line here is nothing fancy. It's 3 units of Greatswords. These guys make up a decent anchor. They'll hold to their own. They've gotten a buff to leadership. Now they have 2 more leadership than they did before. These guys have been getting steadily buffed into, honestly, very respectable levels. I really do like my Greatswords. For the rest of the build, front line, or Vanguard unit of 3 Outriders here, backed by the Zintler's Reichsguard in case my opponent decided to get a little cheeky, which he kind of did here with some Direwolves. And then 2 Demigods with Halberds, one of which is the Royal of Fights. These guys recently got a slight rebalancing, I'd say. The normal Demigods just got a straight-on buff, but the Halberds, I do believe, lost some melee defense, I think it was, but they did gain HP. And of course, the Griffites are now 50 gold more expensive. Now for my opponent, he decided to go with a dirt cheap front line of Skeleton Spears, backed by a single Corpse Guard with an Unholy Lodestone, and then a bunch of Graveguard. You can see the Graveguard with 3 weapons, some normal Graveguard, Sternsmen, more great weapons, and that's a pretty respectable front line, and definitely against only 3 Greatswords, these will definitely be able to cut their way through, if only because of the Graveguard and the Sternsmen and that stuff. And the Spears oversaturating things in between is going to be just a nightmare. Alongside that, he does have the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, so I thought this was actually pretty cool, because this is an interesting matchup. Now, the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord here is mounted on a Barded Warhorse, I do believe, based on the speed and the armor. He does have his Helm of Discord. He's got Heart Piercing, which is actually crazy synergy with Blood Knights, because you've got that extra armor debuff going. He's got Undeath Resurgent, Sword of Anti-Heroes, Wind of Death, which is an interesting choice, Race Dead, and Invocation of the Heck, as well as Honor of Death, which is a crazy in-combat buff. Similarly, of Caronites there for some terror, which could potentially be devastating, Blood Knights, and then the Dire Pack. Now, immediately my opponent is sending out some Direwolves, but the Zintler's Reichsguard is in position to support. I will lose an Outrider there, but, you know, Zintler's Reichsguard is just going to mulch these guys in short order, just piling in against them. And Reichsguard, of course, with their very respectable stats. Zintler's Reichsguard has ludicrous melee stats, honestly. They're almost on par with Blood Knights, I think. Yeah, they're actually better in some ways. And now we've got, of course, our other Cav contingent pulling in, hopefully for a flank to pincer these guys, as our Greatswords sort of push up to block off this infantry. You can see Outriders get a few shots in there. We're trying to get the Royal of Griffites and Karl in here to collapse and get rid of these Direwolves. I don't want to be losing my Zintler's Reichsguard if I can avoid it. And here we're actually able to force these guys to shatter. You can see they're crumbling and they disintegrate. And then the Jade Wizard gets in there. Now the Zintler's Reichsguard is taking a little bit of pounding, but I'm holding off on healing them because I'm figuring that we'll be able to extricate themselves. You can see I actually manage to pull them out. And my Outriders, safe and sound behind the front line, are just pounding this Corpse with an Unholy Lodestone. It's only a 500 gold unit, so you might think this is a bit of a waste of ammo, but honestly, it can have such a potent impact. You really want to get this unit off the field before it completely screws me in the front line here. Now, having dealt with that, my opponent's skirmishers, which was a pretty good win for me. I only lost a handful of Reichsguard and a handful of Outriders. I do now push the Greatswords forward and sort of pull away with my Cav contingent, since I don't want to get bogged down and engaged there. The Outriders, I think, are very important in this matchup instead of, say, Archers, or not Archers, handguns, because handguns are much easier to bog down with Skeleton Summons or with either skeleton summons or what's the other one called? The zombie summons, so, or even cripples and things like that. Whereas Outriders can just kite it. So over here we're actually going to throw a captain against the skeleton spears. Not an ideal matchup, but these guys don't have much AP, so it's not too much of a threat. Unfortunately, Wind of Death, though, does go down to these great swords, completely annihilates the unit. Although I do try to get an Earthblood in there, it's far too little too late. This is putting me on the back foot here because suddenly my front line is collapsing. My opponent is going to be able to wrap around to these great swords and make them collapse too. Fortunately, though, my Cav contingent is still rather healthy, and they're able to squeak away with relatively low casualties. You can see the Zilver Shard in relatively good shape. I'm actually going to countercharge it with Carl, getting him in on the Dire Pack. And in come the Demigryph Knights with Halberds, and we are going to collapse on this pocket here. Just coming in from all sides as the fire does come in from the Outriders. Now, I don't have any source of magic damage, which could potentially become an issue against those Karen rates. But with so much fire pouring in, we're definitely going to get some good results. Unfortunately, Helm of Discord does go down. Skeleton Warrior Summon being a huge nuisance there. And my greatswords there are collapsing. But the cavalry contingent is just pouring in. And my Outriders are going to be able to flex around to here. At the moment, I'm kind of being a clown and failing. But we're going to get them out to here. We're going to be able to start pouring fire into the flank here. And Carl, friends, with all these buffs, is able to really keep things together. You can see all those crazy buffs keep him in there. He's beating down these Blood Knights. These summons, they're not going to do too much to Demigryph Knights. With Halberds, Reckon and Thing, of course, buffing them up. And we do have a bunch of heals going down constantly. And the thing is that while this might seem beneficial to my opponent's heal blob, he's already used a Blood of Winds of Magic on his Blood Dragon by using that Wind of Death to clean out most of my front line. He's also kind of used up a lot of winds. He's also kind of going to struggle to get key units into the fight here. He wants to really have his Blood Knights in the fight, and instead, everything's kind of getting diluted. He's not able to focus down Carl. He's not able to properly focus down the Griffites. The Zimmer's Right Guard is in there mucking things up, and at the same time, there's just pounding fire pouring out from the Outriders. My opponent can't really catch them. He doesn't have any tools to catch them. So we're just able to whittle down. You can see I'm focusing that Blood Knights down first, knowing that they are by far the most dangerous target here. Especially as long as they have some healing on them left to go. Carl actually driving a little too deep there, but we are going to be able to get a nice heal off, a nice Earthblood, and Carl is just smacked on these fools and really doing some work. You can see the circle of Imperial Steel here, bogged down amidst the spears and the Sternsmen and all those units. But in the meantime, because my opponent is now so focused on this pocket, it means we're actually able to rally on the periphery, and the great swords are starting to recover and come back in. And although these Grey Guard are going to do their best to push out my Outriders, it's really not going to cut the mustard, and you can see that withering fire pouring in. And Carl's actually managed to isolate the Blood Dragon here, and he's beating him down. You can see he's popped in the kitchen neck on himself, but Carl, of course, no pushover in melee. He's got very high melee attack against only 40 melee defense, so he's really not that tanky. And because Carl isn't actually really getting distracted here, he's able to get some good hits, and Blood Dragon is forced off pretty effectively there. Unfortunately, though, another Helm of Discord is going down, which is going to be a big disadvantage. It's going to mean that these greatswords that just committed are going to have a rough time landing any hits. Helm of Discord, definitely, I think, the thing that makes the Blood Dragon currently overtuned. I think overpowered is a little pushing it a little bit, because you can definitely counter him, and we're just kind of seeing that here, but he's definitely overtuned. But the Outriders, they're just able to kite away from the Grave Guard. Now they're just shooting their merry little hearts out, pounding away at the Karen Wraiths. And I'm countering my opponent's healing with my own healing. You can see another Earthblood going down, healing the Zimmer's Right Guard a good bit. The Greatsword's actually not caught in there, but we're able to surround these undead, start beating them down a bit. Now the Outriders are going to start getting some cheeky shots into my opponent. You can see I've actually flexed the unit over to here, and they're going to start shooting these Graveyard with Grey Weapons. Unfortunately, my Greatswords here are going to break, but they have courageously defeated some spears and actually taken most of these Graveguard on. So honestly, these guys, clutch MVPs here. The Outriders are just pounding these Graveguard with rear shots. They're not going to last very long at all, despite the fact they will probably win against these Greatswords. You can see the Greatswords there do rout finally. But at this point, my opponent's army is essentially doomed. You can see Carl has essentially hit his healing cap, but he's able to land a few hits. Definitely a mistake on my part. I kind of overextended here. I'm stuck in a duel where he really shouldn't have been. But my opponent is going to lose his ward there to that focused fire from the Outriders. And at this point, it is just going to be a game. His entire army is going to shatter, crumble, or all the Griffites staying in there and fight. The Demigryphs almost untouched. They haven't even hit their healing cap, at least not visibly. And at this point, just a few zombies to mop up. You can see the Greatswords diving in, Reichland and Fang active, and we're going to do some mop up in aisle 9 at this point. As I throw everything in, you can see my Outriders actually routing my Greatswords, so well played, Wyvern, well played. But honestly, we're just going to mop up here, and that's going to be game. Pyrrhic victory for the Empire. And I definitely do think this matchup, I don't think it's that bad for Empire. I see people often say it's very difficult, and certainly I haven't really had in my own personal experience playing as Vampire Counts against Empire, I haven't had too many difficulties. But at the same time, I don't feel like I'm at a huge disadvantage with Empire either. Great Swords are a great anchor unit. Outriders are very difficult for Vampire Counts to shut down because realistically, with your cheap heavy cav with Empire, you can generally crush direwolves pretty efficiently. You can also run Outriders with grenade launchers. If you really want to mop up these annoying infantry formations, you can honestly go with Outriders with grenade launchers. You just have to be very wary of zombie summons because they can really disrupt things in the main fight. But you can definitely work, guys. Part of my opponent's problem here was that he really lost several units before the fight went down. He lost both direwolves as well as an unholy lodestone before anything happened, essentially. And the 3 Outriders got massive value there, and it really doesn't show here. But we managed to bait out these direwolves, which meant the Sindler's Rice Guard, you can see, are sitting at almost 200 kills, just annihilated them. And then the Corpse Guard with unholy lodestone got shot to death. So that was 1,500 gold. That was like 10%, 15% of my opponent's army that got wiped out for very little gain for him. But Great Swords are a great pick in this matchup, honestly. They got a lot of kills here. If your opponent goes very heavy on Graveguard, for example, I'm actually very fond of this, and this might be a mistake on my part, but if your opponent goes very heavy on Graveguard and doesn't really bother with too much chaff, they'll do amazing. But if your opponent does bother with a lot of chaff, and oftentimes you'll just see your opponent will bring like 1 unit of Stearnsmen, and then they'll bring a horde of skeletons and zombies. And in that case, the Great Swords will do great. They're going to do amazing. They're just going to cleave through trash for just hours on end. And that's really strong. Jade Wizard I think is good, just try to out-heal and go tit for tat with the vampires. Might not be the smartest every time, but I do think this is generally what you want to do. Your opponent is likely to go very wide and try to swamp you in case you want very heavy on shooting. Now another option, and this is kind of the high elf strat to go with, though I'm personally not the biggest fan of this, is to go very wide with infantry. It works incredibly well for High Elves, probably better than it does for Empire because High Elves have Loth and Seaguard and Sisters of Avalon who can take care of themselves a little better. But you can go with a fairly small front line, a small anti-large goon squad. In the case of Empire, you can't obviously have no nobles, which is what the gimmick is for. Which is what the gimmick is for the High Elves. But you can go with something like say Karl Franz and some Demigryphs. I can actually hop out to good old customs. We can kind of look at a build. It's sort of what I'm trying to describe here because it's easier, I think, visually to describe. But you could do like Karl on him. Honestly, just bring him on a horse. Alternatively, Volkmar's not bad. Boris isn't bad though. I like having the AP from Karl here. Not really a fan for Balthazar for that purpose, obviously, because Balthazar is just there to spam spells. Even if you're going to do that, he's not really going to be gooning much of anything. But, Karl with all his kit, you throw on his equipment, it's only 2,000. He's a dirt cheap lord, really. And you can back him up with, like, a Jade Wizard on a horse, same kit that we ran there, basically. You could actually try to bring Flesh to Stone in this matchup as well and try to get some benefits from that, Power Stone. Because Flesh to Stone, if it's just to buff up your Demigryph Knights, for example, you could bring Royal Thufgryph Fights, or if you don't feel like that, you could bring like Demigryph Knights with Halberds. And then for the rest of your line, you could honestly go super cheap. Go with something like a bunch of spears. Your spears are not quite on par with, say, High Elf spears, that's for sure, but you can go very wide with spearmen, and then bring a lot of Daka. And it doesn't necessarily have to be cheap Daka or anything like that. You can go cheaper. You can bring like Free Company. They can defend themselves a little better. You could go with like this sort of composition. I'm kind of curious how Pistoliers, and perhaps this is deserving of a test as well, I'm kind of curious about how well Pistoliers will do if they get the charge off against Hounds, especially because they can whittle them down beforehand. If we look at the HP on Direwolves, I'm not entirely sure where they're sitting. They're at like 4,000, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 4,500. You might be able to like whittle down the Direwolves and then get a charge in with Pistoliers. I'm not sure if I'd do that though. But you can go super wide with shooting, so if your opponent tries to land on you, and he's trying to summon a bunch of zombies on you, you can just set up a crossfire and pound him from all sides, and at the same time have these pockets of troops to constantly be deflecting and denying your opponent those easy openings. It is a little more difficult for Empire, I think, because Empire you can't really threaten your opponent with a super elite infantry corps, but if your opponent commits to certain strats, it can definitely, I think, work out, and I think it's definitely more than viable to go super wide. You still got like 1,600 points there, so you could bring like another unit of handguns, bring some spears. You honestly don't need the spears with shields now that I think about it. You easily just go with spears like that. I do like my Sigmar Sons, so we can go with like that. Perfect. You've literally got, you match the requirements. You could go super wide. You've got a decent anti-large squad here with the Demigryph Knights that can kind of flex around to defend. You don't have any nets, but you can always finagle or mess around with builds like to get something that is more optimal for your playstyle. But I definitely think you can go wide with Empire and match your opponent tit for tat if you just run away. Otherwise, Outriders can be launchers, great choices. But I think there's a lot of things Empire can do in this matchup, just like there's a lot of things Vampire accounts can do. And so I don't think I personally write this off as a terrible matchup either way. I think it's actually pretty balanced. And without having stats from, say, CA to confirm or deny that, no, there's not much I can say. But I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and hopefully a bit informative on the matchup. I have been looking into making some videos, proper videos for breaking down each faction one by one, but that is something I need to do proper preparations for. So right now I'm kind of sorting out how exactly I want to do that still. Vampire accounts probably a bit overtuned right now. At least the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord definitely probably needs a nerf. Probably will get a nerf, I would assume. Perhaps lose that darn Helm of Discord, which is really bonkers on him. If you guys didn't already or you don't follow it out, definitely check him out. And it's a pretty cool video. He just breaks down a bunch of duel situations and it gives you an idea of where you can expect, or so you can see where the Blood Dragon really stands. And right now, he's actually more powerful than the Red Duke in a straight up duel, which is just nuts. That's ridiculous, in my opinion. But yeah, I definitely do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, don't hesitate to post them. I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.